as you find the doubt in Mark's Gospel by Pilate, then John says, well, look, let me introduce a spear thrust to say that since crucifixion pierces no vital organs, perhaps he could have died by the spear thrust. But even there, according to Encyclopedia Biblica, at the time of the spear thrust, Jesus was apparently still alive. And again, Mike has not answered the question, when exactly did Jesus die? It's inconsequential for a Christian to now wanting to know when did Muhammad receive Surah 4 verse 157, because that dates Christianity 600 years later. The theological distrust that Muslims have for Christians and Christianity is not the same as the theological distrust that a Christian can have towards Islam. So it's a weak argument to now say, well, I don't know when Jesus was actually killed or when he died, but now by implication, can you tell me when Surah 4 basically came up? That's a poor argument. Mike went on to say that the Romans were expert executioners. But even so, at the time, mistakes were made. I gave you the post-mortem reports where people were certified dead. Were there post-mortem reports conducted in the 1st century? Were there any doctors to feel the stethoscope of Jesus to see he had died? Did the centurion feel his pulse? Mike said he surmised. A case in point was given from Acts chapter 14 of the Bible, where Paul was stoned and he was left for dead. But when the executioners left, what happened to Paul? What happened to Paul? Did he die? He got up and walked away. They were, of course, not Roman executioners, but the story nevertheless points to the inadequacy of the post-mortem executions at that time. You can also cite the historian, Pliny the Younger, who complained of the human situation being as it is, that we often fail to know if a person is really dead. One may add the gospel description of the Roman centurion having expressed his conviction in the innocence of Jesus, and this would indicate that the centurion had no reason to complete the act of killing Jesus. The centurion believed in Jesus. Why would he now want to go out of his way to ensure that Jesus be killed? Why would Pilate want to go out of his way? Yes, initially he didn't want Jesus to be killed. He found no fault in this man. His wife was having nightmares and they threatened to blackmail him. But there was a thunderstorm, there was an earthquake. And Mike again has not dealt with the issue of what I had suggested. When they came to the governor and they said, secure the sepulchre, lest the last error be worse than the first. What was the first error, Mike, and what was the last error? Deal with the issues at hand. In respect of the idea of the gospel, of the accounts being multiply attested, again, I've dealt with this particular issue. The unsympathetic reports, my God, why have you forsaken me? Well, if on the one hand, Jesus prophesies his death, and you've given the particular accounts, I believe in Mark's Gospel and a number of other passages where Jesus says he's going to die and be raised on the 3rd day, and he prophesies his death, then why is it that at the time of his alleged death, he asks God, or he tells him, God, why have you forsaken me? What was he suggesting? Why does he go in the Garden of Gethsemane and pleads to God to take this cup away from me? Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt, submitting his will to the will of God. In addition to the question about the death of Jesus, I have also mounted a serious objection to Mike's other points, which he has not acknowledged. The appearances, the belief of the disciples in Jesus' resurrection and crucifixion from the dead, despite their having a predisposition against such a belief, and that this belief was essential for reversing their recent belief that the crucifixion proved Jesus to be a false Messiah. You see, Mike, what you're doing tonight, let's assume all of us were to leave with the idea that Jesus was crucified and he died. Then what? He died as a blasphemer. That's it. Finish it for me. It's like this, Mike. You need to deal with both the issues at the same time. You're using the historians to cite the historicity of the crucifixion, but you're not completing it. You don't want to deal with the issue of the resurrection, which is intertwined, because historically you cannot prove the resurrection. And that's the point that we basically deal with. You have to have the two. It's like playing football or playing rugby. And each side is playing soccer and playing rugby against each other. And no side wants to score a try or no side wants to score a goal. Excuse me. So the point I'm trying to say is you cannot have your cake and cannot eat it at the same time. In one of his previous examples in his books, I believe Craig has cited Michael Grant and Gert Ludeman in support of one of his particular views in terms of the later appearances. But these scholars hold that the appearance to the disciples was nothing less than a subjective belief in that particular point. What about the Quranic depiction of the crucifixion? Mike argues that one of the most egregious errors in the Quran is its denial of the crucifixion. And in response, I have argued that the Quran cannot be proven incorrect on this particular score. On the other hand, I have offered a plausible interpretation on this particular verse, one that takes into consideration the multiple uses of the term crucifixion, in which the Quran says that they kill him not in the ordinary sense, nor did they kill him by means of crucifixion. It's important, Mike, that Mike thinks that he has early evidence in respect of the claim of Paul. But it should be noted that it's only a scholarly guess that Paul got the information a few years after the crucifixion event. Even Paul himself declares that he does not get the teachings from any man, but by a revelation. And so hence we cannot confirm or be certain that he's reporting certain facts as historical and distinct from revelatory information. Much of what Mike basically argues presupposes a gospel accounts, and he says that the passion narratives are credible and attest. But look at the passion narratives. They contradict one another. They evolve from one account to the next account. Mike argues that historians agree that Jesus died, but the historians agree that his tomb was found empty, and the historians agree that Jesus appeared to his disciples. But the further we go up in the list, we find that the fewer historians will tend to agree. Moreover, it's not the same historians, except for a few conservative scholars, who will hold onto all three claims: that Jesus died, that the tomb was found empty, and that historians appeared to his disciples. And to be quite frankly, any historian would conclude that Jesus died, because it's quite common knowledge. Anybody who lived 2,000 years ago and is no longer here, where is he? He's probably dead. And so on that basis, historians will conclude that Jesus probably died. But my argument is that there was strong evidence to indicate, which Mike hasn't dealt with, that Jesus had in fact survived. So in summary, I find it strange for Mike to suggest that I haven't dealt with any of his points in the issue of the earlier report. I've stated that Paul hasn't had personal knowledge and he's delivering what he receives at Jerusalem from James to Peter. And quite interestingly, in Luke, I believe 1933, we are told specifically that a prophet cannot be killed outside of Jerusalem. It's important. A prophet cannot be killed outside of Jerusalem. Where was Jesus killed? On this particular point alone, the crucifixion and the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ would be falsified. I thank you, and God bless you.